Hey guys, for the last time this season, we'll be updating the power rankings for Survivor 44 following episode 12, and this was an interesting episode where despite it being a straightforward vote by the end of it, we got plenty of interesting content to discuss here going into the finale, but there are 6 players to talk about, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 6, we have the boot for this week, but here we have Jammeh Lynn. And come on, she was never winning either. I mean, she obviously got dunked on a lot throughout the season, and she didn't get that much content in this episode, which really made it feel like they were setting it up for a Carolyn boot, where, like there was sort of two sides to me on this, where on one hand, I feel like it didn't quite make sense for it to happen, given her edit, and me thinking like she and Jay and Jen were going to get to the end together. However, on the other hand, like we obviously have what happened with Cody on 43 and Omer on 42, where we had like these big blindsides happening at the final 6, which did make me think for a little bit that was going to happen. Although by the end, I feel like it was all like largely a fake out, which obviously leads to Jammeh going out here. And again, Jammeh's game is mostly mediocre. I mean, she doesn't seem super aware of her game. She constantly overestimated herself, and by and large, she was like pretty funny to watch, just seeing how like inept and unaware she was throughout the season. But really, I feel like from episode 1, like after learning like about the whole shot in the dark stuff, I never ever thought she was winning after that point. And sure enough, she just continued to get dunked on a lot throughout the season until she was eventually taken out. So because of that, she is here at number 6. And with that, there are 5 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win based on their edit and current game position. But at number 5, I did decide to go with Lauren, and I feel like Lauren is probably the most likely person to be booted at Final 5, where I feel like her edit is largely in line with what you expect from like the first boot in the finales. Like if we are comparing them to like Lindsay from 42, where yeah, like she's gotten like consistent content, but I feel like it never really had much depth. I feel like it was largely circumstantial. Like the fact that she gets personal content almost exclusively when she goes on reward, like makes me think that she was simply never that important to the overall story. But at the same time, I feel like it lends itself to her being seen as this last second threat that needs to be taken out, which could lead to her being seen as this big threat that needs to be taken out. So the others have to team up to beat her at Final 5 immunity. They do so and they vote her out. I feel like that's her most likely trajectory at this point. And yes, while Jammeh claims that she's a big threat, I feel like she's not super likely to win if she gets to the end either. Now, exit interviews after the fact could potentially disprove this. However, I feel like based on what we've heard from the other players, I feel like she isn't seen as that big of a player given how close she was to Jammeh and the fact that Jammeh herself was never that aware of the game. So I feel like for all those reasons, I can't really see Lauren winning the game or even getting to the end, which is why I do have her here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we have another player that I don't think is winning at this point, but here we have Heidi. And I think Heidi is pretty locked to get to the end of the game at this point. She literally has a confessional this episode where she says that her ideal final 3 is herself, Carolyn, and Jam, which makes me think that that will be the final 3 by the end of it. However, even so, I think she's the least likely of them to win a jury vote. Now, yes, there's a chance that she could be Carson and Fire, which could give her some credibility there. However, I just don't think it'll be enough. I think Atika is still going to win this season. I think Heidi will mostly be seen as someone that got dragged for a lot of the game. So I think all those things will ultimately work against her, which is why I do have her here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and guess what? It's the Tika 3, and it's just a matter of ordering them. However, at number 3, we do have Carson, and I think the same thing applies. I think Carson's probably going to get through the Final 5 all right, where like maybe he's going to consider cutting Carolyn. However, I think more than likely they're going to think Lauren's the bigger threat and they'll cut her there, which leads to a Final 4 where I think he's probably going to go into fire against Heidi and more than likely lose. I don't think there's really anything in this episode that really changed that, as yes, you could say that like we haven't seen as much outwardly negative stuff about his edit. However, at the same time, I don't think there's much of a story for him to actually win on his own. I feel like he's more so been a vessel to describe the strategy of the Tika 3 while not fully embodying like the essence of the Tika 3, if that makes any sense. So I think at the end of the day, Carson's going to be cut before the end, which is why I do have him here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and it is the same top 2 as last week. But at number 2, we do have Carolyn. And I think this is still largely informed by my thoughts on her from previous weeks. However, I also think it's also informed by my recent jury scenarios video where I went through each of the jury scenarios and I just don't see like a ton of locked votes for Carolyn in most scenarios. I think as she gets to the end, I think she's probably going to have a tough time like claiming that she played harder than Carson or Jammeh. But I will also admit that I said something similar about Gabler last season, where even though I could see a world where he could win, I just didn't see where the actual votes would come from. I couldn't see like who exactly would vote for Gabler over the likes of Cassidy at the end. And I think that's sort of tough with Carolyn. Now, I think at the end of the day, I think there's a world where she gets to the end and she gets credit for things like playing the idol at the final 7, even though at the end of the day, that wasn't technically a successful idol play. I could see that being something that she uses. I could see like her doing something in the last 2 rounds of the game that could cause her to gain respect. I could see her having a solid final tribal performance and that causes her to net some votes. I could see a world where she picks up votes, and I feel like if that were to happen, I think that could make her a more competitive threat at the end of the day. Now, at the end of the day, I still think Jammeh is more likely to win than Carolyn. And plus, we got that content in this recent episode where she is starting to be seen as this big threat, and how, like, we obviously saw Jammeh consider targeting Carolyn at the end. And while he doesn't go through with it, I think that's more so a preamble for the final tribal, where, like, we're going to see this play out more in the finale. Where at that point, I could see Carolyn's, like, whole, like, philosophy of, like, not playing the game 24/7 and how she is unabashedly herself. I feel like that could seriously be challenged at that point. And who knows, maybe we could see it resulting in her giving up her game for Jammeh at the end because she likes Jammeh. I could see this going a number of different ways, but not necessarily in ways that results in her winning at the end. So while I feel like she's a more likely winner than the other players we just talked about, I still feel like Jammeh's going to edge it out, which is why she is here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 44 going into the finale is still Jammeh. And I feel like a lot of this is more reinforced by me going through my jury scenarios exercise, where I still feel like Jammeh will have the edge in more jury scenarios compared to Carolyn. Now, yes, there is a knock in that he was the main person pushing for Carolyn being blindsided this past round. However, even then, he was considering it as a debate. And obviously, he doesn't go through on that, which is a bit of a knock there. But I still feel like it's more so setting up for the finale where him and Carolyn are going to be seen as the two big players going into it, where they're probably going to get to the end together and probably duke it out. Now, yes, I still think Jammeh's going to edge it out over Carolyn. However, I still feel like, based on the edit, I feel like Jammeh is more likely to win. He's the person I feel more confident in winning at this point. Now, even though Carolyn has this potential for her to steal it from Jammeh, I feel like if I had to pick a winner going into this finale, I have to pick Jammeh. So it's for all those reasons that I have him here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out with the channel. Now, I will be live streaming my reaction to the finale on Wednesday night, so you can check us out then. And after this season, I'll be doing a review and a player ranking, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which you can join by clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.